So hi, this is Mary Kurek of Frontrunners Innovate magazine, and this is an investor or business advisor interview. And I'm so excited about bringing Toyin to you. And Toyin Umesiri is, you're in Chicago, correct?
Yes,
Yes,
correct.
okay, but I have this feeling that that's not always been your home. So I want to
No.
get a background on you first. So tell us, before we get to what you're doing in business, let's find out where you came from. So if you'll tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be able to share, some wealth of information and knowledge today. So, in terms of my background, professionally, I actually spent time in corporate America, right? Before I became an entrepreneur and doing the work I do now. Most recently, I served at the headquarters of Walmart in Arkansas. So, you're right. I've not always been in Chicago. Actually, I've only been here for 2 years. But I've lived in different states in the US, Michigan, Ohio. I've loved traveling and spending time in small towns, and now this is probably the biggest town I've been in since I've been in the US. So a little further back, I actually came into the US 2004 for my graduate program, so my master's program, master's in information systems, and then I moved into corporate America from there. So it's been really, really a great journey for me to be able to connect with people, to be able to provide solutions. And what I do now, using my experience in the world of global trade in terms of transaction at scale, in terms of working with the world's executives, is saying, how do we bring the continent of Africa into mainstream international trade conversation? What are the opportunities? What are the gaps? What are the challenges? And to also have that conversation within a business context, because conversation about Africa is not new, right? People have always been within that space talking about Africa the last 20, 30, 40, I mean, even forever. I think what's new is that there's data, but there's actionable data within a business context. What I've found is a lot of the conversations has leaned more on foreign aid or international development without a true ROI. So from an investor standpoint, an investor is not looking, doesn't want to look at it from a charity, like I'm giving my money away. They're looking at Africa as, what's the return on investment? What's the trend? What's the economic growth? What are the opportunities? So for us, when we work with investors, we're trying to say, okay, what are the data points you're looking for that will help you make a decision? Because that's the gap that we have, is that a lot of the data coming out from research are more geared towards development efforts versus investor relations. And that's what we're trying to fill the gap on now.
You know, we were talking just before we came into the recording about some of the problems that innovators and startups have. They have this wonderful idea. They know it's going to solve problems. They have an impactful heart. They want to create impact, but maybe don't have a clue about how to work within governments and how to get into certain countries. So one question I have for you is, what's the biggest stumbling block? What's the biggest hurdle for these
I, I,
people?
th- I think the biggest hurdle, just like we have in building a business anywhere else in the world, even in America, is to understand your customers. You need to start seeing Africans as customers, not just trying to ram a solution down. I have, thinking, oh, I have the best solution in the world. America produces the best XYZ in the world. Great. But just like in business, if you're trying to serve a customer, even here in the US, just because your restaurant is the best doesn't mean everybody will start buying from you. You've got to position your goods and services, and you've got to connect with the right key decision makers. So it's not just enough to also tell or just let people know. You've actually have to study, who is the right person to sign this contract, or who needs my solution? How do I present my solution? How do I build a relationship with them? And that's what has informed, the type of work that we do. For example, with the Trade with Africa Business Summit, we're now in our third year and we're hosting the first virtual edition, is because we found out that the stakeholders, I call them the stakeholders, right? From the investors to the policy makers to the business community here in the US or in Nigeria or in Africa, different parts of Africa, everybody wants the same thing, which is we all want to trade, we all want to advance, we all want to increase our engagement. But the problem is that we're not speaking the same language, and we're not understanding what the barriers are, and we're not working together to remove those barriers. So there are trade barriers. Most of it is lack of information. Lack of, so there's when you talk about transparency in supply chain, right? Being able to know that if I send a good, what paperwork do I need to complete for my goods to be acceptable? Those are the things we now get to engage, the decision makers on. For example, last year we had a key, government official at our event, and after sitting the entire 2.5 days, at the end of the event, it was like, Toyin, we never knew this. You need to bring more of my colleagues here so we can go back and fix all of those things you guys are pointing out. So I think we're still at the very early stages. But what I'm saying is we all need to be at the same table. We need to be talking to one another. We need to be discussing what the challenges are, the real challenges, because sometimes we assume that the decision makers know what we are facing in the business world. Again, most of the conversations has been policy leaning, not necessarily business leaning.
Yeah.
So how do we close that gap?
Policy to business. Um, as you were talking about the African Trade Summit, that is really what kind of drew me to you. I know you're a social entrepreneur and you've got a portfolio of these interesting, innovative projects that you do. Certainly have the influence and the background to support all that. But tell me a little bit more about the Trade Summit. And we kind of know now why you probably created that, started that. But what happens inside a summit, and when's the next one, and how does somebody participate? And give me all that. All right.
Yes. So I'll give you a background to how it started and the type of the way it was designed to work. So for me, having a one-on-one conversation with somebody like Donna Smith, the immediate past CEO of Tyson Foods. Tyson Foods is a $40 billion poultry chicken business. One in every three chicken or poultry consumption in America comes from Tyson Foods. So here am I talking to Donna Smith and saying, Donnie, I want you to speak about agriculture in Africa and the future of agriculture with the population growth and food security. But for you as an investor, he was the first person to develop like a feed mill in Rwanda for chicken. So one of the things, and these are the stories we get to feature and talk about, where he went to Rwanda and said he wanted to do a business initiative. And what they said to him was, hey, Donnie, many people come to Rwanda and say they want to do a test project here and there. If you really want to help, what we need is a commercial feed mill where we can buy feed for our livestock. We're always importing, the feed for our chicken, for our livestock, but we have the money. So this is a business venture. We have the money, but we need to buy it locally. So he built, it was, I think, $1 million work that he built the first feed mill. And guess what? After he built that, two other investors have built theirs because it's right? Because this is not charity. This is people have livestock. They want to buy grains from you to feed their livestock. They're not asking you to donate it, but they're saying it's such a hassle for them to import all of that today. Do you mind building one in country and we'll buy from you?
That's awesome because
So
that becomes part of their economic development there because it's going to provide jobs.
absolutely, absolutely, and even forex savings. So that's a story, and then me saying, okay, that's great. We want to talk about that story. It's stories like Scott Ford, who led a company, Alltel, and sold that company to Verizon for $29 billion, and then took that investment and plowed it into Africa. He started in Rwanda. Rwanda has a lot of story. We have a lot of stories to
Apparently.
share.
Yeah.
Yes, but these are American investors, right? So that project is started with coffee in East Africa. It's now the world's largest roasting company for coffee. So what part of what we do is for Trade with Africa, talking to those type of people and saying, hey, what were the challenges you faced? How did you build this? The journey so far, how has it been? Because I'm not telling anybody it's easy. I'm just showcasing people that have done it. Because in the business world, we want to see the real stuff. we
Yeah.
don't just want, we don't just want textbook. My husband is a professor. My late father was part of establishing two Nigerian university. So no offense to people in the academia, I get it. But in the business world, we're not just about theory, you know. Oh, yes, you can do this. No, show me who has done it before. Tell me what the
Yeah.
challenges are so that my journey can be easier. So Trade with Africa started from that foundation of business executives, of identifying pillars of trade, so agriculture, healthcare, or supply chain or retail, because moving goods and services back and forth, you're going to see that you're going to eat some bumps, because there are about 15 landlocked nations on the continent. So if you want to move goods, there's no shipping dock. So if you want to move your things, you have to go by road transportation. Oh, wow, what's the road network like? So we bring those type of people. Like last year, we brought in from South Africa Cross-Border Road Transportation Agency. They are responsible for transportation in the southern region. So what we look at is, if you look, and we've now developed what we call the Trade with Africa framework, to say these are the pillars of opportunity that we've identified over the years, because we're trying to get people to focus on solutions and not just conversations, right? So we'll say these are the pillars of opportunity. How do you see yourself fit? How do you fit into agriculture? If you look at the value chain in agriculture, what role do you want to play, right? How does your product or service present itself as the region is trying to develop its own solution in that space? So Trade with Africa is geared towards those type of conversations that are extremely practical. And next week, August 7th and 8th, is when we're having the next one. And with COVID-19, everything has moved virtual. The good thing is we've actually been building our virtual platform for months, even before COVID. The reason was, a lot of the times people fly in for our events and say, Toyin, we flew in, but we want to maintain relationship with the people we've just connected with. So we've actually been solving for digital before COVID actually happened. So we happened just to say, hey, we already have a solution, because we've tried different attempts, and now we actually have a virtual solution. So we're going to be hosting that event virtually. This year, what we're doing differently is that we're going to drive more engagement, so more Q&A, because in the past we will have 40, 50 speakers, 2.5 days. It's usually an overkill, or in terms of an overload of information. But this year we're keeping the speakers smaller, but we're going to do more deep dive Q&A with each speaker, because we want to draw as much knowledge from them. So for example, we have the economic advisor for the vice president of Ghana coming. That's somebody we can literally spend hours, hours with, like, okay, Ghana, manufacturing in Ghana. What does, we can go down that list. So that's what we're doing this year, is we're actually making it more relaxed, because people sitting in front of their computer, it's going to be quite a long time, right? So we want it to be engaging as well. So for me, it's been fun, because we're driving activities and engagement within the business space.
This is fantastic. So this is coming up really fast. So how does anybody can anybody just lock in, or do they need to register, or is it already closed out for
Well,
people
they
to
can still,
engage?
yeah, so we've made it so easy. They can still register. It's cwasummit.com. There they would see a lot of information in terms of what we've done before, the current speakers. I really encourage people to read the speaker's bio. We usually create a full page for each of our speakers, because they've been hand selected for particular reasons. So one of our speakers actually serves on the President's Advisory Council on doing business in Africa. So they advise President Trump on Africa. So the other day, I actually listened into their conference. So in terms of, as America, in terms of the different agencies for the country, how does America see Africa, right? When they look at the China engagement on the continent, how is America positioning itself and the private sector? So those type of conversation is something we also want to talk about. We also have people that have spent time in the Pentagon, that talk about safety, right? Security. How do you protect American interests on the continent. These are things that in the business world, people are truly care about to say, how do I protect my investments? Right? And I encourage people to diversify,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
diversify as much as possible. And we also talk about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So I'm super excited. You can see that there's
I
just
love
so
the
many,
energy. This is
yeah,
great.
there's so many amazing, um, what I call hot topics. These are hot
Yep.
topics that what I found is that conversations that happen in Washington, D.C., runs around diplomacy and political correctness. In the business world, we call it out as it is, right?
Yeah.
If there's a booby trap, or if there's a minefield, you don't want anybody stepping on that. So, so people would find that towing is more direct, because we want to cut through the chase and get to the transaction. So that's my approach is, what do I need to know? What are the opportunities? Tell me, we're tough enough in the business world to hear the truth, right? Tell me the truth. Where is the most challenging place? Where should I be avoiding, right?
Well, I
You
was going
know,
to ask you a question that was sort of the reverse of that, because I think I know what the answer would be, but I want to see what your take on it is. From the standpoint of innovation and technology, is there a pocket in Africa or a country that you think is a little ahead or more receptive than maybe some other countries?
so the way I would answer it is, when people approach us, it all depends on what you're trying to solve for. So if you're asking questions in terms of technology innovation, there's maturity level that is different across the continent. If you talk about, when you talk about international trade and retail and manufacturing, there are more some regions more mature and more advanced and more sophisticated than other areas. If you talk about commodity, depending on the commodity, East Africa may have this, West Africa may have this, Southern Africa may have this, like wine and juices may come from South Africa. If you're looking at infrastructure development, there are more projects happening in certain regions that, so for us, it all depends on what it is you're trying to solve for. So you don't have to, so in the past, people would say South Africa is the whole be all, everything goes to South Africa. Things have changed. Things have changed. Rwanda, even though it's a small country, people are making it their new headquarters because they can springboard easily. The doing business is very, Rwanda is very friendly to international delegates. So people are saying, even though it's a small country, we can open an office there and then springboard and reach the rest of the continent from there. That's something that South Africa used to do before. So that's what I would say is that it all depends. From a technology standpoint, you want to look at Kenya. Kenya is actually leading the world when it comes to
That's the name that I
digital.
was going to come up with. Yeah,
Yes, yes. So
I've heard that
so
a
when it
bunch.
yeah, so when it comes to digital innovation, and Kenya right now is actually working with the US on a bilateral trade, that everybody's looking. It will be the first ever that US would ever sign with any African country. So it's a first. So they're looking at it right now, and they're trying to see if they can get it done before the next election. But that's something quite interesting that we are all watching for. So yeah, if you think about in terms of startup ecosystems, so in the I have a technology background as well. If you were to say, okay, startup ecosystem, technology innovation, there are hubs. There's Nairobi, there's Lagos, there's Accra, Ghana. Depending again, each of them have different characteristics. So depending on what it is exactly you're looking for, what you're looking to solve for, you might get different talents in those regions.
Latoya, last question, because you know so much about all of this. So I'm guessing there's a consultancy behind all this. You do. So tell us about that because I want to drop the link in on your spotlight here.
Yes.
So
So thank you. So yes, absolutely. My own personal website, toyinumesiri.com. And what I have found myself doing the last couple of months, even with COVID-19, is that I'm having to provide basic business support in consulting, just basic. Because when I'm telling people we want to trade, it's more advanced to be trading. And I'm finding a lot of people that are interested and say, Tony, we've heard you, we're ready to go. But they're having, I have to almost explain what they can, how they can set it up. So what type of sales agreement, distribution agreement, right? What are the consumers like? Like just something as basic as that, we're actually having to help people put that together. Where, I mean, just yesterday, there's this lady here in Chicago that has developed an amazing spice mix, and she has to streamline her sourcing, like from source to the consumer. Like, where do I source my raw materials from? How do I package it? How do I distribute it? Those are the things that I really love, because I come from that background in terms of supply chain logistics, all of that. I love solving those type of business challenges. And sometimes I feel like with the solutions we're offering, it may appear like we're boiling the ocean, uh, in terms of the size of what we're going after. But what I want to say is that this is an underserved community or conversation, especially in the context of business. There's not enough places you can go to get the type of support that we offer. So yes, just my personal page leads you to everything else. So toyinumesiri.com, and then it's kind of like a web. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's like when when you make a phone call and they say, if you want this, option one, if you're
Yeah,
looking for this,
yeah.
option two.
Very cute.
Yeah, because people approach us for different reasons, and we recognize that.
Wonderful. Well, Toyin, we could spend like half a day talking to you about. I already have like three more questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to let you go because I know that you've got a lot going on. But thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing some of your, pearls of wisdom with
Well,
our audience. So thank you. We'll be back at you, I'm sure. Find
thank you
out some
so
more.
much.